It's the boy Blackbeard Mirage. I'm back. Major salute, major what's happening. Just want to greet you and welcome you to the Midnight Mirage Classic. Now this tape is going to be a massive bloody guillotine drop, okay? So I want you to prepare yourself and I want you to embrace yourself, okay? This is going to be a massive guillotine drop. I got to go ahead and admit it. A lot of blood and guts going to be flying by the end of this tape. The homework assignment. What I want you people to do is to look in the description box of this tape. And I'm going to drop a tape in there called Moorish Harems, The Fall of Man, which is a tape I made quite some time ago. I think it was sometime last year. It may have been even been before that. But it's called Midnight Mirage Woman Science, Moorish Harems, The Fall of Man. And what I did in that tape is I talked about how this quote-unquote group of people that we call in quote-unquote Moors, who really are just indigenous people to Europa, Africa, and the so-called, Arabian Peninsula. But how these people, amalgamated themselves with a lot of serfs and a lot of slavish people that they had included into their societies and civilizations. And how these indigenous people across the Atlantic Ocean had become very, very dependent on the slave system that they had created. So this was, included in the economics. So not only do you have, as far as like the harems, because a lot of people even have this harem idea of, just some black men and they just had a bunch of naked women running around and all this. Well, we're going to even dispel that shit today, because I'm going to read in a book called The Imperial Harem by Leslie Pierce. And I'm going to talk about, the real history of that shit. Because when you all are talking about the Moors, you all are talking about the Ottoman Empire. Let me repeat that. When you all are talking about the Moors, you are talking about the Ottoman Empire. Now, what I'm going to also do in this tape is kind of show, or at least why I think a lot of these people who are dealing with the whole Aboriginal American history and why they have an issue with these people that are calling themselves quote unquote Moors. The root of this is basically they have this idea and concept that there were some people that, were of melanin, carbon in their skin, and they came across the Atlantic Ocean and they had a group of slaves with them. And these people brought that culture, and long story short, it ended up leading to the Americas being colonized. Now, I will say that in a lot of things I've read and come across, some of that is true. I'm pretty sure that these groups of Europeans that were coming over here, whether they looked like us or whether they may even been Caucasoid, not all of them were friendly. Some of them wanted to come over here and steal, kill, and destroy. So you had groups of people that wanted to come over here and do that. And then you had groups of people that wanted to come over here and maybe do trade. Maybe even had certain long distant relatives over here. But nevertheless, this is what the deal is. So we're going to look into that. Like I said, look into the myths and realities of the harem. And we're going to just kind of, I just want you all to understand why you're going to see a lot of these Aboriginal so-called Americans. And they just have this issue with these so-called Moors. A lot of it comes from what they have read, but I don't really even know if they understand fully what they read. So if you are one of those people that's still lurking around my page, because I see it's a lot of Negro nut huggers who just love, tugging at the masculine energy of Blackbeard. So this tape will help these people understand a little bit more. But overall, I just said a mouthful, but what I'm getting at is that this is going to help you understand why, these Aboriginal Americans don't like these so-called Moors. It will help you understand what was really going on in these harems. And it will also help you understand the transference of wealth and the transference of resources, and why a lot of these amalgamated Catholics, Jews, and Christians, when they came over here as pale people and pale servants, why some of them did have a little bit of resources. So we already know that in the 17 and 1800s, that there were, millions and millions of Caucasian poor people coming across, the Atlantic into the Americas. And they were known as, the so-called settlers. We know that. But there were also small groups of people that did have resources. Like yesterday when I made the tape dealing with the Jews, the so-called Caucasian Jew, and how these people were very, very big, and a lot of sex trafficking, and a lot of the whole so-called slavery and the prisoner of war situation. Now, you got to keep in mind that these Portuguese and Spaniard Jews, some of them may be Sephardic and some of them may be Ashkenazi. But either way it goes, these people came over here from, the lands of so-called Europe. All right. And in order for them to come here and set up a lot of the businesses that they did, they had to have some kind of background of information, knowledge, and resource. And a lot of this kind of ties into these whole Moors and stuff like that. So basically, we're going to just, clear up a lot of that stuff. And this will be basically a part 2 to the Moorish harems, the fall of man tape. So as I said, that tape is going to be in the description box. You can listen to that tape as a part 1 to this to get, some clarity. And this will be a part 2 to extend what I introduced on the last tape. So the first thing I want to read is I want to read about the myths and realities of the harems, because what this will do is it'll help you understand, I guess, the background of what was going on across the Atlantic. So if we already established as knowing our identity of Aboriginal Americans and we've always been here and we hadn't come from anywhere, then what we're going to do now is look a little bit into what were these Moor, so-called Moor situation, in Europe and so-called Africa. So if you want to know the kingdom and the empires I'm talking about that these Moors were ruling, like I said, it's the Ottoman Empire and it's what you all know of as the Holy Roman Empire. Now, when I say this now, don't think that everybody involved in the Ottoman Empire was against you, and don't think that everybody involved with the Holy Roman Empire was against you, because that's not true. I just read to you all yesterday how a lot of Seminole Aboriginals in the South, in Florida and Georgia, or so-called Seminole Indians in the South, how a lot of them were being helped by what they call Moslem pirates. So you had a lot of Moslem pirates that were around the coast of Georgia, Florida, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of these Moslem pirates were helping the Seminole Aboriginals in the Civil War. How do we know this is true? Because in Fort Negro, which was in the bottom of Georgia and in the top of Florida, okay, in Fort Negro, when Andrew Jackson and the United States Army came in to fight against the Aboriginals in the South that we call in the Seminoles, these Aboriginals were not only waving the British flag, but they were also waving an all red flag. So this shows that they had some type of allegiance with Britain, which is an extension of the Holy Roman Empire, and they had some type of allegiance with the Ottoman Empire, because that's what the all red flag is. Okay, so keep that in mind, because you had certain colonial aspected, certain colonial minded, we'll say Europeans, so-called Moors, and then you had some of them that didn't necessarily think like that. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's also like, let's say, the Crips and the Bloods. Just because you a Crip don't mean that you cool with every Crip. And just because other niggas is Bloods don't mean that you ain't got a few niggas that's blood that you fuck with. Okay? So it's not this whole black and white thing like a lot of us want to think. It ain't that cut dry like that. And also, I want to keep this in your mind too. A lot of us are real quick to talk about the dirty Moors or the dirty Europeans and the dirty white man and all that. But what I'm not hearing you all talk about are the dirty Aboriginal American high priests and chiefs that were running these villages, and a lot of the badass deals that they were doing to sell out their own people. I read in multiple accounts where it talked about Aboriginal American chiefs selling their own people out, helping keeping their own people in slavery. They was being paid certain salaries by the United States Army to keep fucking intelligence agencies and COINTELPRO like work on other Aboriginal tribes that didn't want to work with the United States. They were selling off a lot of resources and valuable items for thunder sticks, which are guns, and firewater, which is moonshine and liquor. So you had Aboriginal Americans here that was dirty as fuck, just like you had so-called Moors that was dirty as fuck. And it was probably just as many on each side. Okay. Another thing I'm going to tell you is this. A lot of you all think that, oh, well, the white man came here and it was just us fighting the white man. Or a lot of you also may think that it was us fighting Moors, which that was the case. But what you don't know is this, and I'm going to make this real quick. I was looking at a documentary on the Peruvian Empire or the Incan Empire, and they were looking into a ceremonial burial ground of a lot of the different nobles of the Incan Empire. But they came across a certain area in the cemetery where it looked like it was a bunch of bodies that had just been thrown in there, and it wasn't ceremonially processed. So the archaeologists were wondering, like, well, this is inconsistent with everything else we found. So what has happened here? So they went and started digging, and they started looking at some of the skull remains and the different skeletal remains of those bodies that had just been dumped in that hole, right? So when they looked at the skull of one of them had a bullet hole in the head, okay? And it also had a lot of other puncture wounds from different stabbings and stuff like that. So you could tell that the people had been fighting. So the archaeologists were thinking that, okay, well, maybe these bullet holes we see in the skulls are from the Spanish weapons, and this may be dating back to the Spanish infiltration of the Incan Empire in Peru. So this is what the archaeologists were thinking. So as they were doing their different scientific, analysis and things of that nature, they came across some different basically fragments that were still in the skull. And what they did was is compared and contrasted this with a lot of the weapons used in Spain, and they compared and contrasted it with the type of muskets and firearms that they had. So what do you know? Lo and behold, the bullet matched, right? So the archaeologists can now say, okay, so we can confirm that this is part of the Spanish invasion on the Incan Empire. But what a mystery was this. Then the archaeologists were wondering, okay, well, we can match this bullet hole, but there were a lot of other stab wounds and a lot of other, abrasions on the skeletons of these people. So they was like wondering, okay, well, we see a bullet hole in the head, but this stab wound over here, well, where did this come from? So they compared the stab wound with a lot of the different swords and the different stabbing devices that the Spaniards used at that time. But the stab wound didn't match up. So they was thinking like, okay, this is weird. How do they have a bullet hole in the head from a Spaniard, but this stab wound from somewhere where we can't match? So what they did after that is they started comparing the stab wound to other Incan weapons that were used at that time. And then they matched. So what the conclusion to all this is that the Spaniards had help of other Native Americans or other so-called Indians when they came to fight the Aboriginal Incans, when they went to fight the Aboriginal Mayans. You know what I'm saying? They had help. So it was other disgruntled ass tribes that were here. Some of them may have been Mongoloid and amalgamated people, and some of them may have been Aboriginal people that chose to sell out. But nevertheless, the Spanish had help. So they always show you the story about, oh, they had, 20 guns and fucking 10 men and were able to kill 10,000 people. They real quick to tell you that. But the other part of the history they don't want to tell you about is that Cortez and all these other Spaniards had Native Americans that were helping them. So yeah, it may have been, let's say, 100 Spaniards, but they were accompanied by like 3,000 Native Americans. So then they all go to fight against 4,000 Aboriginal Incans. So this is what was fucking going on. It wasn't just us versus the white man or us just versus the Moors. That shit was so mixed up that you can't just say black and white what the fuck the shit is. But I had to say that because, sometimes I be wondering, like, what kind of real scholars are you people out there that want to keep arguing about something? Because I'm going to tell you something about Blackbeard. Blackbeard is formally educated. Like, I come from a household of educators and people who are very, very deep into academics. Okay? Blackbeard is college educated. Wait a minute. So not to be like braggadocious or anything like that, because y'all know Blackbeard ain't even like that. But y'all see my college degrees right there. They go an accounting scholar degree I got from college. And here's my diploma right here. You know what I'm saying? So Blackbeard do this shit, man. Like, I'm not just a YouTube scholar. I'm formally putting this stuff together. So for all you jailhouse scholars out there, that don't really do extended research or just read one thing or see one video and all of a sudden you think you know the whole history, you're completely confused, buddy. But anyway, going back to The Imperial Harem by Leslie Pierce, and we're going to read about the myths and realities of the harem. And after we read about that, then we're going to go into a comment that a brother made, and we will use that to conclude the tape. We in the West are heir to an ancient but still robust tradition of obsession with the sexuality of Islamic society. The harem is undoubtedly the most prevalent symbol in the Western myth constructed around the theme of Muslim sensuality. One of the most fertile periods of the production of texts and images treating this theme was the late 16th and 17th centuries, and the most frequent subject, the court of the Ottoman sultan. Preoccupied with its own forms of monarchical absolutism, Europe elaborated a myth of Oriental tyranny and located its essence in the sultan's harems. Orgiastic sex became a metaphor for power corrupted. So the first thing is that the reason why you all have a strong hatred for these Aboriginal men of Europe and Africa who had these harems is because the Caucasian people who had some records of what was going on, they had a certain mythological concept and a certain distorted view, not only of sexuality, but of what the whole harem was. Okay, so keep that in mind that a lot of you all don't like harems and brothels and don't like polygamy either because you have a European concept, a Caucasian concept of it. Anyway, continuing. In fact, Europeans were not off the mark in fixing on the harem as a central arena of politics. It was not sex, however, that was the fundamental dynamic of the harem, but rather family politics. Let me repeat. It was not sex, However, that was the fundamental dynamic of the harem, but rather family politics. Now keep that in mind when we talk about family politics, because we're going to go into the transference of resources in a little while. Sex for the Ottoman Sultan, as for any monarch in a hereditary dynasty, could never be purely pleasure, but it had significant political meaning. Its consequences, the production of offspring, affected the succession to the throne, indeed the very survival of the dynasty. Let me reread that. Sex for the Ottoman Sultan, as for any monarch in a hereditary dynasty, could never be purely pleasure, for it had significant political meaning. Its consequence, the production of offspring, affected the succession to the throne, indeed the very survival of the dynasty. It was not a random activity. Sex in the imperial harem was necessary, surrounded with rules, and the structure of the harem was aimed in part at shaping and thus controlling the outcome of the sultan's sexual activity. Sexual relations between the sultan and chosen women of the harem were embedded in a complex politics of dynastic reproduction. This fact belies the simplistic but indefatigable notion that harem women acquired power by imprisoning sultans in the thralls of their seductiveness. In fact, their power had complex resources that stretched far beyond the walls of the imperial bedroom. So what this is telling you right now is that the harem not only was a place of sex, but it was a place of politics. Then it goes on to say that there were a lot of controversy because the consequence of the king or the sultan and his sexual activities would be the production of offspring. And this affected the succession to the throne, which is indeed the survival of the dynasty. So now you all wonder, well, why do we see all these amalgamated Arabs ruling Saudi Arabia, ruling Dubai, ruling all the oil? Why do we see these Caucasian pale Jews running all the financial capital markets? Why do we see the pale Catholic Church, running the Holy Roman Empire? The reason why is because the people who originally ran all those systems looked just like Aboriginal people, copper-colored people. But they were amalgamating themselves and sleeping with people that didn't look anything like them. So what the Ottoman Empire was doing is a lot of the times they would go on certain campaigns in Southern Europe. And for lack of a better word, a lot of those little islands around Southern Europe, they would just go in there and kill up a lot of the people, you know what I'm saying? And then take the women and sell off the kids in slavery, So imagine now, and once again, this shit has nothing to do with Aboriginal American men, okay? This is some men from across the fucking Atlantic Ocean that really I know nothing about. I've never been to fucking Europe. I've never been to fucking Arabia. I've never been to fucking Africa. So don't come to me about no harem shit because I don't know anything about that. That's not my culture, okay? But anyway, these people across the Atlantic Ocean had that going on. So when they had all these slavish Caucasian women, and these Aboriginal sultans are starting to sleep with them, next thing you know, and once again, these are Aboriginal sultans of Europe and Africa because America ain't the only fucking place with Aboriginals. But anyway, so when they started to sleep with them, now you're starting to have the slave Caucasian woman with an offspring, and then you have the indigenous, let's say African or European woman and her offspring. So here you have a black man that has a child with a black woman. They have a black child. Then you have a black man that has a child with a white woman. They have a mulatto child. But this black man, when he dies, his resources and his will are going to be basically passed on to whoever he gives it to in the dynasty. So you had a lot of issues where the mothers of these different women, of these children, were battling with each other over the sultan's attention, battling over who's going to be in the will, battling over who's going to get the resource. So that's why it says right here that this fact belies the simplistic notion that harem women acquired power by imprisoning sultans in the thrall of their seductiveness. So that's what these harem slavish women were doing. They would seduce the sultan, you know what I'm saying, ghetto gad the fuck out of him. And then next thing you know, he's having children with her and probably forgetting about his own women. So this concept of being mad at American Aboriginal men and thinking that we were replacing our women with Caucasian women, that shit was not fucking us. That was these Aboriginals of Europe and Africa. They were doing that shit. You don't believe me? That's why the whole entire Ottoman Empire or the Arab world looks mulatto or amalgamated today. Where do you think Arab people come from? Those are not natural people. Where do you think fucking Latino or Mexican people come from? Those are not Aboriginal people. Arabs are not Aboriginal, nor are Mexicans Aboriginal. They both come from the amalgamation of Indigenous Europeans and Indigenous Africans with Caucasian women. That's the bottom line. Now, when you deal with South America and you deal with these so-called Mexicans, now early on, a lot of these unions were coming from Aboriginal American men and probably some of the different, amalgamated women who were in North America and South America. But probably around the 15, 16, 1700s, 1800s, or basically any Mexican person that's walking around today, I guarantee you that when you look in your family tree, it's going to go back to some Aboriginal American woman and some European Caucasian man. So most Mexican people, although they may not like what I'm going to say, but when they go in their family tree, a lot of them are products of illicit sexual relationships or rapes between these European Jews when they were coming over here in South America and the indigenous women that they came across. So when you had enough European Jews doing this with enough Aboriginal women, now you're going to have a whole new entire race of people created. And that's a lot of what we call Mexicans and Arabs. But at least with the Arabs over there, it was a different situation. Okay. So by the time, the Holy Roman Empire and the Ottoman Empire was bleached out, by the time those Moorish nobles, it wasn't really that many of them left around. Then you start seeing Caucasian men and Arab men seducing Aboriginal women. But prior to that, that wasn't the situation. They didn't have no kind of power. So Arab men and Caucasian men, Jewish men, no matter what they are, anybody that's non-melanated, they got power from some Caucasian female ancestor they had. Excuse my French, that was fucking some Aboriginal man that had wealth. And if you don't believe me, go and look at the secret society here in America called the Daughters of the American Revolution. And go and look at what their whole history is and what they place their lineage back to. Because like I said, America has certain little brothels and harems as well. Okay. And a lot of them were actually the, Caucasian prostitutes of a lot of the Aboriginal nobles in Philadelphia. So once again, you have to do some real research before you come dealing with me, because, I don't walk around thinking I know everything. If it's something I'm not sure about, I'm going to go look into it. OK. To an Ottoman subject, the term harem did not connote a space defined exclusively with sexuality. The term harem is one of the important family words in the vocabulary of Islam, derived from the Arabic root HRM. Because remember how I told you all that vowels are not in ancient languages? So look at how right here it says that in the word harem, because the vowels here are the A and the E, okay? But the consonant HRM is the Arabic root. So keep that in mind. Like I said, ancient languages don't have the vowels. The vowels represent the spirit, or the Elohim, basically. Okay. So certain spiritual words will have it, but on regular, it didn't really work like that. Okay. It says a harem is by definition a sanctuary or a sacred precinct. So a harem is not just a fucking whorehouse like you all are thinking. Then it says by implication, it is a space to which general access is forbidden or controlled, and in which the presence of certain individuals or certain modes of behavior are forbidden. So in other words, the harems are like a spiritual zone. It's like a spiritual type of place. So it says the most sacred of exalted places in the 16th century Ottoman world were harems. The holy cities of Mecca and Medina and their environs were and remain the two most revered harems in Islam. Then it goes on to say that the central Muslim religious compound in Jerusalem, Islam's third most holy city, was also known as the noble sanctuary, or harem as-Sharif. In Ottoman usage, the inner courtyard of a mosque, its sanctuary, was also a harem. So the harems actually were in the mosque. Okay, so that goes to show you that these harems were not just whorehouses like we thinking, like a bunch of sex going on and a bunch of just immoral behavior. That was not the case. Because also in this book, it will show you that a lot of the living quarters, or where the sultan lived, the mosque and the harem and a lot of that stuff, it will be somewhat connected to even where the sultan lived. So you can see how, you know, these Caucasian women, for lack of a better word, were brought into a pretty nice situation. Also, too, if you want to know in the Arab world, what are the names of these amalgamated children between these Moors and Caucasian women? In history, they're known as janissaries. Okay? In history, they're known as janissaries. They're known as Mamelukes. Okay? They're known as janissaries and they're known as Mamelukes. So when you look in the Arab world or Arab literature, anytime you see that word janissary or Mameluke, those are basically the harem children that were basically raised up in Islam. They learned Arabic language from their Moorish fathers, their indigenous fathers. Okay? And then they gave them swords and told them to basically fight on behalf of the Ottoman Empire. And then eventually these armies of amalgamated Arabs chose to turn on their fathers. And then that's what happened. So now the whole amalgamated world, the whole Arab world looks mixed. But I had a conversation with a guy from Syria. Also, too, the United States just did an airstrike in conjunction with, I think, the United Kingdom and France and Syria. So World War III, y'all look out for that, okay? So y'all just keep looking out for that shit. Keep looking out for that. So as we can see, I just wanted to read the background of, what was popping and what was going down in the harem. So basically what it is this. The first thing is that these harems, they had sexual relationships between the sultan and certain chosen women. And it was really a lot for dynastic reproduction. So what a lot of these Moors were doing over there is they was making children, but for some strange and some odd reason, they was choosing to give their power and authority not only to their children that they had with Moorish women or indigenous women, but also the ones that they had with the Caucasian women. And I don't know what they was thinking on that. That's where they fucked up at. Because what happened is these children start seeing that their mothers basically were nothing more than whores. And this made them feel a certain kind of way. So now they wanted to rebel against these Moors. You just fucking somebody's mother like that and using her as a piece of trash. Somebody eventually is going to have an issue with that. So that's kind of what that was. Don't it make sense? But anyway, so now I want to read to you all a comment that a brother left, and then we'll just, kind of talk about it. So in my last tape, he says, this explains how whites got wealth from the start. They were originally serfs of the Moors in Spain. These Moors of nobility produced mulatto children with their pale concubines, and the children inherited this nobility. As these Moors passed their wealth and knowledge to these children, I'm sure they passed on stories and myths about America, hence why it was Spain and Portugal who came first. LOL. These were both previously occupied by Moors. Once bleached out, the Moors who remained were forced out because of conflicts with pale Christianity and Moorish Islam. And he wanted to know my thoughts. And my thoughts are basically, what led me to make this tape. But this brother basically just broke the shit down. You know what I'm saying? Like I told you all before, these Moors or these Aboriginals are the only people that had the wealth. These Caucasian women that they had were living in barns, were homeless, you know what I'm saying, living in caves and stuff like that. So when they went to Southern Europe and they was going on their campaigns, a lot of these women, they were taking these women. They would take these women, they would take them back to the harems. The Aboriginal women that were in the harems would clean these women up, teach these women about hygiene, teach them how to take care of their hair, teach them about motherhood, teach them about the menstrual cycle, etc. And next thing you know, now the Caucasian woman has now become a human. So she became a human basically from the Aboriginal woman teaching her everything. So the Caucasian woman learned about the number 9 and 12 from the Aboriginal. But anyway, so after the Caucasian woman would be cleaned up, okay, well now she's being sold off in the sex market. And now these Moors are, they got all these Caucasian women now. So when y'all see these pictures of Caucasian women being bathed by Aboriginal or Moorish women, that now you know what was going on. And they were originally serfs. But these serfs were also in Spain and Portugal. That's why he says that when these people came to America, they came from Spain and Portugal. But the people who had occupied Spain and Portugal prior to the Inquisition, it was these Aboriginal Europeans and Africans. So that is exactly where they learned everything from. They were cave people. They didn't know nothing. They didn't know nothing about no literature or nothing like that, about septic systems and stuff like that, about street lighting. And they didn't know nothing about that shit. They learned all that stuff from those mosques, or what we call universities of Southern Europe. So like I said, so when these Catholic church came over here and the resources they had, that's who they had just stole it from. The Moors in Spain and the Moors in Portugal. When those Jews came over here, all those boats and things that they had, that's who they stole the shit from. Then he goes on to say that the Moors of nobility produced mulatto children with their pale-skinned concubines, and the children inherited this nobility, which is true. I don't see how you're going to be a man with resources, have children with a slave, and then think that the offspring is going to, I don't get how you think that that person's going to really keep up what you got going on. They're not in the image of you. They're not even in the image of their mother. Because mixed people, just keep it all the way honest, mixed people are not in the image of their mother nor their father. I mean, haven't y'all noticed that? Haven't you all noticed that when you see a mixed person, they don't look like their mother nor their father? Their skin tone and most of their features and stuff, it ain't from the mother or the father. It's a mixture of both of them. So how do you think this newly created species of a person is going to identify with the original person? That's not going to happen. So these Moors was dumb as fuck. And this is part of the reason why a lot of Aboriginal Americans don't like them. That's right. This is also, too, why a lot of these Aboriginal American women don't like seeing Aboriginal American men with Caucasian women. Because they kind of probably know all about this history. Then he goes on to say that that these Moors probably also told them stories and myths about the Americas. They did. They did. These Moors were storytellers. They wrote literature, mythology. So, of course, that's what the whole holy city of Jerusalem was from. The whole golden city of El Dorado. That shit was America. They heard about that shit when they was in fucking Southern Europe. When they didn't even know how to read and write. When they was grunting. They was hearing these stories. So that's why they wanted to come over here. And then he said that once these Moors were bleached out, that it was forced out because of the conflicts they had with pale Christianity, which is true. That's why they got their ass kicked out of fucking Southern Europe. And that's why the Portuguese and the Spaniards colonized Africa the way they did. So these same children of these Moors, the same slavish people that they helped raise up, turned on them. And to save their own ass, some of those Moors said, well, look, we're going to help you out. And we got some family across the Atlantic and we can colonize them. And then some of the Moors that was in Southern Europe and said, no, fuck y'all. We're going to fight y'all. We're not going to let you go over there and try to take stuff from our Aboriginal people in America, our cousins over there. And we're going to just die. We're going to die trying. Because there was also a story that in Southern Europe, when they were expelling the Moors out, that they told some of them, look, we're going to let y'all get on the boats with y'all's families and stuff and let y'all get out of here clean. So when all those Moors got on those boats, they tricked them and then set the shit on fire. So it was a lot of Moors that wasn't fucking with them, is what I'm trying to tell you. Not only did they kick out Aboriginals who was dealing with Islam, they was kicking out Aboriginals that was dealing with Judaism. Okay, that's what that was. So when you all hear about a Marrano, that's somebody that chose to convert from either Islam or Judaism into Christianity. And that could have been a forced conversion. That could have been them converting and, trying to just stay alive. Who knows? But the point is that's what that is. So then he goes on to say, he said that you ever notice how when folks say their parents immigrated over here that they were really poor, which is true because most Caucasian people will tell you that when their ancestors came here, they were very, very poor because they were. So when they talk about these millions and millions of so-called Africans coming on slave boats, these could have been Caucasian people who were held in the different slave dungeons on the coast of West Africa and the coast of North Africa. And they were bringing their ass over here. Then he goes on to say that when a lot of these Europeans came over here, that they were looking for more than wealth, which is true. They were looking for the holy city of Jerusalem, and they were also looking for what's known as the fountain of youth. See, all these mystical, magical potions and properties and stuff, that shit was right here in the Americas, from what I'm seeing. So yeah, they came over here looking for food, gold, land, and stuff like that, and wanted to practice their own form of religion because they were trying to escape the Inquisition. But they was also looking for, these mystical, magical properties that they knew that the high priest over here had. So then this is where the high priest of America come in at. These greedy ass, dirty ass American high priests who saw their hole. So not only you had these dirty ass Moors coming over here, so you think the dirty Moors that came over here never encountered no dirty Aboriginal Americans that was willing to work with them? Of course they were. And I mean, I read this in a fucking book. I can't remember the name of the book, but it talked about how those high priests were basically being paid salaries. And it's also talked about how American high priests were going over to Europe for vacations and stuff like that. So these niggas live in lavish while we fighting to get our freedom. So don't just say that, oh, the Moors across the Atlantic were bad. No, motherfucker, it was Aboriginal Americans that was fucked up too. I also read a story that talked about an Aboriginal American from Georgia around 1715 or the 1700s when you had the several Yamasee wars. And basically you had an Aboriginal who was fighting against another group of Aboriginals. And those other Aboriginals basically kidnapped his sister. So he was mad about it. So what he decided to do was when the Spanish and these different foreign people came here and tried to fight Aboriginals, he decided to team up and help them. Because he's mad because they took his sister. So then he helps to fight the Yamasee. And then when the Caucasian people win, they promise him that they're going to give him X, Y, and Z. They don't uphold their promise. And all he gets is a coat in return. I'll never forget reading that shit. But that's what it was. So they came over here with that foreign ass Christianity, that foreign ass European way of life, that pale faced Jesus. And then they used the whole curse of Canaan thing against us. And they used the whole Deuteronomy curses against us as far as Aboriginal Americans. And this is the history. So for some of y'all that are justified about being mad at certain indigenous Europeans and indigenous Africans and saying that they came over here and helped colonize and they brought with them some slavish Christians, you are right. But this mentality of thinking that I'm gonna be mad at this word more and thinking that when you say that word that you spiritually are always going to attack and line up with the people you think you're attacking, then you're uneducated to me. You just are. You just are. Because I guarantee you this, and I'm going to wrap it up. Most people in the intellectual community probably will agree that the word Moor is describing more of a physical appearance of somebody than it is a nationality. Now, you got some people that do think it's a nationality, but I don't think that it's a nationality. I just think it's an appearance, just describing an appearance. So when people say Moorish features, to me, that's just the people with bronze color in they flesh. You know what I'm saying? The 9-ether hair, the so-called big lips are basically the attributes that Aboriginal so-called black people have. But to me, Moor is not a nationality, nor does it have anything to do with religion. It's basically, it's not, it doesn't have as much weight that we think that it has, basically, is what I'm saying. There is not a specific group of people that are just called Moors and Moors only. And how do I know this is true? Because when I go to Taiwan and I call those people Taiwanese, or let's say I go to Japan and I call them Japanese, no other people in the planet can be called Japanese. The only people who can be called that are people that come from this geographic region, right? Well, the word Moor doesn't work the same way. Because you had people in America that was being called that, people in Europe that was being called that, people in Africa that was being called that. So it has nothing to do with, let's say, geographic region. It doesn't have anything to do with nationality either. Because some of these so-called Moors were from different nations. You know what I'm saying? Like, once again, the Holy Roman Empire and then the Ottoman Empire, these are two different factions. And then it doesn't have anything to do with religion. Because why did they call the people who came from the Europeans from France, the Europeans from ancient Britain, the Europeans from ancient Prussia? Why were they calling them Moors? But they dealt with Orthodox Christianity and some of them dealt with Judaism. So you had people being called Moors that dealt with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So when I have looked at this thing from an objective point of view, it seems that this word is just describing the physical appearance. Whatever you want to take it and run with is on you. But as far as people in the Midnight Mirage, I guess I'm just saying that because I don't want you brothers and sisters confused. I don't want you all getting caught up in this whole arguing about Aboriginal or Moor and all these semantics and all these words, because none of it really means anything. See, at the end of the day, it's people that sell out other people, not words. So it wasn't a Moor that sold out somebody. It was the person that we are identifying as a Moor. They the person that sold out somebody. The word Moor is just it's a 4-letter word, people. It don't got that much power, but it's the people behind that shit is who we need to be mad at. So don't think that when we say Moor, it's just everybody gonna just know who you talking about. That's almost just like saying the black person or the white person or the person with the green shirt, the person with the red shoes, the person with the white hat. I don't know who the fuck you talking about. You know how many people I can see in a group that got on green shoes or a white hat or a red shirt? So we can't really identify when you say that like that. Not really, not people who know extended education. Now, if you, once again, if you a jailhouse scholar, you one of them conscious community niggas up there, then maybe that's all you know about it. Okay? But people who have done a little deeper research, they'll see that, oh, wait a minute, this word Moor isn't always just used, you know, to correlate with religion or empire or anything. It has multiple meanings, okay? But this tape should help clear up some shit. Hopefully it does. I mean, it cleared up some stuff for me, you know. But major salute, man. One love to the people. It's the boy Blackbeard, and I'm out. And I'm going to wrap it up with this. The woman that looks like this is the woman that if you were to have a child with, you're not necessarily going to lose the resources. Because she looks like you and the child looks like you. So they're going to be able to identify with you a little bit more. So all you black women come on my page mad about, you know, oh, you talk about interracial dating and all that. Look, I'm saying that for the multitude of other brothers out here that I know are doing that. And I don't really have no problem with them on that. I don't give a fuck where no man sticking his penis or where he is ejaculating his semen. That is on him. Blackbeard is not into them Caucasian women. So if y'all want to do that shit, go on Mad Bus Driver page or go on one of these other niggas page that don't fuck with black women at all. Because I guarantee that Blackbeard probably one of the last niggas on this shit that really fuck with y'all. So don't run me away. Because once you run me away, that's it. Because ain't no nigga out here going to speak up for y'all like I do. And that shit facts. But y'all stay tuned, man. It's the boy Blackbeard the Legend. I'm out.